Hello, and thanks for joining us for National School Choice Week. My name's Eliza Buckingham with School Insurance Advisors, powered by Van Popering Insurance. We're a local agency here in Charlotte that specializes in school insurance and employee benefits. And we are here with Marty McCarthy, a prominent figure in education and strong advocate for school choice. And in Marty's history, he's helped to start 7 schools, both a mix of private and charter schools. And we're actually here today at one of his schools, Bonica Classical Academy here in Huntersville. So Marty, you clearly have a heart and passion for education. Can you tell me a little bit of how you got started in education and why you're such a strong promoter of school choice in your community?
Thank you, Eliza. I'm glad to. Thank you for this opportunity. As you may know, my background is I'm a religious person. I was pastor of an Episcopal church and experienced a calling. While I've consumed a lot of higher education myself, twice almost finished doctoral studies, but got sidetracked forming a school, it's because of that calling that I simply had to honor. That led me into founding the first school I was involved in creating. I built the board and laid out the mission with the people on the board. And we created Trinity Episcopal School in uptown Charlotte. And we specifically put it there because that was a very tough area in the community that needed a school. It's grown to be quite a significant school in the private school world. But that calling manifested itself into a lot of deeper study about what makes for great education. So I then went about reading all the books and concluded we missed it. I should have made it a classical school. So I got off the board, and thinking that we'd eventually have a few more K-8s that would lead to a high school, I initiated the work to form Palisades Episcopal School on a classical model, a private classical school. And after forming several more private schools, including one serving the Asperger's community called the Epiphany School, I went on to do public charter schools because that allows us to reach much more children. And that's exciting to me. You see, the reason is also deeply wedded in me. My father taught me the importance of education. He did not have the privilege of formal education, really past 6th grade. But in his K-6 years, he had the blessing of being able to go to Boston Latin School, which is quite a prominent historical school in this country. And he was classically educated for that period of time. And then he had to help his family with making ends meet. So I think his education after that was a little here and there kind of thing. After the U.S. Navy, he got a good job with a small company that went on to be International Business Machines. And he did very well. And he always made sure we had what we needed, but nothing more. And he took care of his family and his community. And education was a primary value for him. And recognizing what he gave me with the opportunity for an education, I've continued to give that back to others through my work with education. And then I think that the last reason I tell you why it's so important, as a pastor, I've had people walk in my office that initially men and eventually ladies look like you, winsome, personable, very successful. They'd close the door and start crying. And I'd look at them like, what's going on? And if you can imagine, over the years, I had enough of these conversations that I began to notice a thread to the conversations, and it was this. I hate my life. And I'd say, why do you hate your life? I know your spouse, I know your children, I know where you live and work, it's all good. Well, no, Marty, I hate what I do. Well, why are you doing what you do? Well, I went to school, got a degree, got out, found a job, climbed the ladder, here I am, and I can't afford to quit. I have obligations and dependencies, but I hate it. And I'd ask them, well, what's your calling? And they'd look at me dumbfounded, like a deer in the headlights. I'd say, what's your passion? I kept changing language until I got into business language, looking for what is they must do with their life to find their fulfillment, and they had no idea. And then I looked at the fact you spend 14,000 hours of your life in the K-12 experience, and for all of my parishioners, almost all of them, college and some graduate school, and they have no idea why they're doing what they're doing. And I looked at the failing of education. Education is simply running kids down an assembly line now, because we're using a model of education that was designed 100 years ago for the industrial age, and we have not kept it abreast of the changes in our culture. We're long beyond the information age. We're moving into new models of learning and living, and our educational system has not kept up. So I kept pushing for better education that allows us to be responsive to the needs of the children in the future. So I do that through classical charter schools, because classical teaches you how to think, not what to think, how to learn, not what to learn. Indeed, I want to tell you, Eliza, if you ask the futurists and the economists, to whom does the future belong? Does it belong to the knowledge worker of today? No, it does not. Does it belong to the manual laborer of 50 and 100 years ago? No, it does not. The future belongs to the learning worker, because technology so impacts the workplace. If you do not know how to learn, you're dead in the water and you don't even know it yet. There's only one model of education that teaches you how to learn, and that's called classical. So it's the structure and the content of learning. It was developed or redeveloped out of the work of Dorothy Sayers, who wrote something you can all read on the internet tonight called The Lost Tools of Learning. It's 20 pages. And she decried what she saw in the 1940s, having earned her PhD, one of the first women to earn her PhD in England when women entered higher education. She decried what she saw in education, because she said, education is going from the high classical norm of teaching you how to think to the low functional norm of teaching you what to think. And indeed, we're there. So those who return to the classical education model are teaching kids how to think and how to learn, not what to think and what to learn. They're giving kids freedom. That's very, very important. You must give kids freedom. With that, they have hope for the future. So it's very important to me.
Yeah, I can tell. That's awesome.
Thank you.
I think the parents and families in our community are very grateful for what you've done so far, and hope that you continue your efforts.
I hope to.
So Marty, you have started 7 schools. Once you create your mission and your board, how do you define success once the school has opened?
Thank you. I think you feel it in the lifeblood of the school. You see it in the growth of enrollment. You find it in the contentment of children who are eager to come to school. Indeed, because the first school I initiated is now 20 years old, we have some track record to see. And I remember the headmaster years ago telling me, though it's only a K-8, most of the kids in that K-8 went on to college. And when they would come home from college on their first fall break from college, they'd oftentimes come to their K-8 and hang out and visit with the teachers. They were so excited about their school. It was a place they wanted to come even when school was out of session. When you find that kind of enthusiasm, there's your telltale. And that comes when you've equipped children with the ability to learn, so that what they're asked to do with their day, they're capable of doing. So when they know how to learn, learning is easy and it becomes fun, then they're engaged. If you're not equipping them with the tools of learning, but they're sitting in the classroom disengaged, they want out and they don't want to come back. But we see it in the growth of enrollment. I've had the privilege now, I've sometimes bumped into families who, from poor circumstances, the first school I created, Trinity Episcopal, I and the board created, let me be very clear. I've seen families who've said to me, even though it was a K-8, that K-8 school allowed their child to get a full ride at Duke or Davidson or Chapel Hill. Wow. And they came out of poverty. Well, that's when you do education right. You open kids up to have a great future. So we have to do it. And we have to create choice so that we help each other get better. It's just required. Absent choice, we're going to be monolithic, one size fits all. Kids are going to disengage, as they are now. So our educational system is falling further and further behind. If you look at Program for International Student Assessment, I invite your viewers to look up PISA, Program for International Student Assessment, and see where America stands in the K-12 experience among the developed nations of the world. We spend more money than anybody in the world for education for our children. Here we're falling further and further behind. That's because we have a monolithic system that is not responsive to the community anymore and leaves children floundering. So we need choice. And that school choice will force the competition that will make both better. And that will serve all children. So that's what I'm after. Thank you.
And kind of going off of that, you talk about this one size fits all, and obviously you can't have a one size fits all approach when you're starting a school, and given that you've started several, we know every school requires a unique plan of action.
Yes.
Why is this important, and how do you do that?
Well, you have to find people who recognize the crisis of education. And I find employers constantly saying these kids have degrees, but they have no skills. They have no ability to think. They have no ability to reason or work cooperatively with their colleagues in the workplace. And so they're hungry for better. When I find that, I start talking to them about education. And if you, with such people as that, cohere a group that want to work on a school, you simply look and say, is there a school needed in this community here? Will this help? And if it does, you start walking them through what will have to happen to make a school come about. And it's a little different in all circumstances, but the key factors are a very strong board. You have to have a very, very strong board. And the schools I've been involved with, we're blessed to always have a strong board. And then you find a very good head of school that has an entrepreneurial spirit. And you pledge to back them. You evaluate them, but you also back them. You support them. You find them whatever they need to educate children. And when you can do that, the school wins. Kids want to be involved. The families are happy. You thrive. Enrollment grows.
Success.
Yeah.
So Marty, the most recent school you helped to start is Bonnie Cohen Classical Academy, which is where we are today, which opened in the fall of 2019, right in light of COVID-19. So tell me a little bit about how its first year has gone with the pandemic, and kind of overall how you think the pandemic has affected charter schools and private schools.
Wow, thank you, Eliza. There's a lot of history to this school. We are blessed beyond words to have Mrs. Joan Roman as our head of school and Charter One as our EMO, our Educational Management Organization. With a strong board, this is a great school, but it was hard getting started. We were supposed to have the building we're in here right now doing this podcast. We were supposed to have the building delivered to us in time for our first year of operation. And I kept telling the construction company, you need to move faster because it's, you need to get this done. And they said, got it covered. Well, they were late by several months, so we had to find, thankfully, First Baptist Church had a facility that we could lease. And we put 250 kids in that facility in the first half of year one. We needed to have our school enrolled at a full 450 that we expected, so it was a very burdensome experience. But Joan and her staff managed it beautifully, and we came here in the middle of our first year of operation and grew the enrollment beyond the 250 we started with. This year we have 750 enrolled and 300 on the waiting list. And it's all because of word of mouth and people understanding what classical education does for the development of the child. COVID has been a burden. We've taken every responsible measure we can to make sure we are safe in how we operate this school. Currently, 3/4 of the student body is physically in attendance at the school, and 1/4 are in virtual attendance. We've kept that quarter, almost all of them, not completely all, but almost all of them actively engaged in learning virtually. That's a decision the parents make about whether they want to be virtual or physically in attendance with the school. To date, we have found no COVID transmission from the school. We have found a couple of people have had COVID that work at the school or have come from other places into the school as a student, a couple with COVID, and we've handled it appropriately. But no transmission of COVID inside the school.
That's great.
Indeed. There are a lot of people saying, and I read an article in the San Francisco Chronicle recently, that because students entering public school have to take the MMR shot, measles, mumps, and rubella, some people think that functions as a prophylactic for COVID. The data is not confirmed yet, but there are scientists beginning to suggest that. And if you look at the fact there's very little evidence of COVID passing among students, you might think they could be right. We don't know yet, so we will continue to practice the utmost of safety for those who are present. But virtual is available to students as well. And that gives families choice, and that's the choice they need. That's the choice that allows them to have their children involved in education so they can go back to work.
Absolutely. So overall, the impact for charter schools and private schools, they don't have the funding as a public school would get. Do you think, the fact that Bonnie Cone, as an example, has been able to navigate through all of this is amazing. How do you think most other charter schools and private schools are handling?
I know some of the private schools I was involved with years ago, I'm not involved with anymore, they continue to have in-person activity in their schools. So the students are coming to school every day. Some public schools have shut down in deference to COVID. Some charters are remaining open and some are doing virtual and while they, for their students. So everybody's handling it a little differently based upon their own experience. But having the freedom to handle it differently is very important.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's one size fits all. And if something happens over here, the response that we take over there will not be appropriate. But we can make a local appropriate decision for the community we serve. We have that freedom. And that's what comes with charter schools.
Absolutely. And it's crazy. Bonnie Cone in this first year has had so many challenges with the building, with COVID, and I think it's just a testament to, like you said earlier, having a strong board, having a strong head of school, and the staff and parents that are involved is able to make it so successful.
Well, what's coming here is what I've already seen at Unity Classical Charter School in Southwest Charlotte. Our head of school received a letter from the State Board of Education she opened about 4 months ago when thankfully some new members had been recruited to the board, so they got to hear this when they arrived. She opened the letter and said, "Congratulations, you're in the top 50% of the schools of North Carolina." And we put that in a tough community on purpose. Well, you don't know me, but in front of these new board members and not knowing what I was going to hear, I said, "Sheila, that's great, but you know me, I don't want to be in the top 50%, I want to be in the top 90%. How are we doing with kids we've had 2 years or more versus kids we've had 1 year in our curriculum design?" She said, "Kids we've had 2 years or more, we're up here." She tracks every kid. We know where they all are in their learning development. She said, "Kids we've had 2 years or more up here, kids we've had 1 year down here. Put them together, we're over 50%. Those kids at 1 year, in the second year, they're going to be coming up here in terms of their ability to learn and achieve. It's all the curriculum. Remember James Carville? He used to get out in front of the camera when he was getting Bill Clinton elected and say, "It's the economy, stupid." Well, I sometimes say it's the curriculum, stupid. I won't say that to everybody because that's impolite, but to some people I might say that.
I like it.
It's the curriculum, stupid.
So Marty, we've been talking a lot about this today, but if you could kind of summarize, ultimately, why is school choice so important?
Eliza, thank you. School choice allows the school to be responsive to the family and the student, extending the values of the family directly into the school in such a way that we can respond to the family. We're not monolithic like the larger systems that are kind of one size fits all. We wait to see what comes down from Raleigh, which comes down from Washington. We're able to honor all the expectations of the State Board of Education, but usually do it above what they're expecting because we can be responsive to the community. Something I learned a long time ago, and I've seen it play out in so many institutions, and if your listeners will think about government institutions, corporate institutions, civic institutions, is an old sociological truth, and it is this: the idea that creates the institution will be destroyed by the institution. We all gather around the idea, the mission, the purpose, we're here, but then we start adding accretions of bureaucratic entitlements so that the institution itself grows larger and larger that's supposed to be there to serve the mission. And a lot of people involved in the institution are more involved in protecting their own job after a while rather than the mission the institution was there for. So the idea that creates the institution will be destroyed by the institution. I find all kinds of wonderful people, great educators, all attached to large public institutions who are frustrated that they can't be involved in education they want to be, in the way they want to be. We have to watch out. I mean, if you look back and some of the people who have a corporate history listening to this podcast will remember, in the 1960s, America pretty much made most of the cars that were used in the world, Ford, GM, and Chrysler. And yet their quality control was going like this in the 1960s and early 70s. And a man named Edward Deming, a leadership guru of that day, went and sat down with the big three in Detroit and said, quality, quality, quality. And they said, take a hike. We got it covered, while their quality control was going like this. He went over to Japan and found two little companies, and I actually think I remember one of them was a bicycle manufacturer, and one was a small engine manufacturer. I may be wrong on that though. But they were small little companies named Honda and Toyota. And he said, quality, 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 and they said, hang around and talk to us. So he pitched his tent in Japan and hung around and talked to them. And after those two little companies grew to be so big and strong, they ate the American car company's lunch. And then we're getting ready to eat their dinner. Washington had to bail out two of those three car companies. Those companies forced Ford, GM, and Chrysler to get better at what they were there to do initially, but they'd forgotten how to do. You see it in the computer industry. IBM could have owned all of the laptop division, but they thought they owned mainframes and did not understand laptops. Indeed, an old friend of mine, Jerry Merkel, helped develop and run the laptop division of IBM. He said they didn't understand it. They lost their way. The culture did not continue to pursue the mission. So he left IBM and went on to be an educator at one of the Florida universities.
Oh, wow.
But institutions can get so big they're not responsive, and that's why I think you find people coming for charter schools. And actually, I want to tell you that most of the people listening to this will not realize that charter schools are free public schools. We have accountability to the State Board of Education, and we must honor their expectations of us just like the public school. Mm-hmm. But we are free public schools, so your people need to know that.
Yes, absolutely. I agree. It's important, and we do want our viewers and parents to understand that charter schools are free, tuition-free schools. If a parent wasn't happy with the public school that they're in, let's say, what's a good way that they can get started if they want to look into their child attending either a tuition-free charter school or a private school? How do they get started?
They very simply look at the school they might be interested in, call the school and ask for an appointment, and come and have a tour of the school and talk about what makes this school unique. I know any school I've been involved with, we would relish the opportunity to meet the parent and talk to them about education and how we would care for their child's ability to learn how to learn, mm-hmm. and care for the well-being of their child.
I think a lot of parents would appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Marty, thank you so much for joining us today and taking the time to talk about National School Choice Week with us. We really appreciate it. And for our viewers, if you have any questions for me or for Marty, feel free to get in contact with me. Our contact information is below in the video description. And we hope that you join us on our social media pages for more content about National School Choice Week. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Eliza.